I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending April the 12th, where you had stocker cattle and calves selling $4 to $8 lower, yearling feeder cattle selling wheat to $5 lower, and these losses took back most of last week's rally that we saw in both markets. But volatility has just been the extreme here in the last several weeks. This market's been real hard to figure out as we've had sharp gains and losses in the middle of the week, making it hard for producers to know what to do. This week they didn't even have a chance to get their cattle loaded and hauled into the markets before they lost what they thought they had gained last week. But this week on a Monday we started out slightly lower, and it looked like we were going to see mild losses throughout the market. But then the storm that started moving in from the west kind of took over, and by Tuesday the storm hadn't gotten here, but the word had gotten out that it was coming, and we saw sharp losses throughout, even getting out into the southeast, which is a long ways from that storm and probably a long ways west of where those cattle were going. But still, just it didn't take a whole lot for the weakness to take over and the losses to mount there. But sharp losses coming from that storm. You know, we also had grain rebounding this week, which also added to the pressure. Your CME feeder cattle board did not give any support at all and just fell flat with any spark. Your fed cattle market traded early on in the week, and it was evident that we were not going to bust through that $130 record high resistance level there, and they ended up trading mostly $1 lower from 127 to 128. But there was a lot of things working against the market this week. New crop calves made up a larger portion of the lighter weight cattle this week, and in the past several weeks a guy could get in there and buy some old crop calves, some hard weaned calves, and he might have to cheat to fill his load by putting a few of those soft new crop ballers on there. But this week he would have had to start with the fall born calves and then maybe fill in with a few of the cattle that he really liked, which weren't going to fit too well. But those new crop calves hurt the market, and this cool weather that we've had pretty much across the middle portion of the United States there, after we seen a few nice warm sunny days last week. But this cool weather is just relentless, and it's got the grass stunted, and we're running a couple of weeks behind on our grass, and so a lot of our local backgrounders are not coming into the market like they normally do this time of year because we just don't have as much grass as we normally do. We also seen two major things happen in the market this week. We saw reported sales of cattle that had been previously purchased to turn out in some major grazing areas, and that grass just didn't develop, whether they weren't going to have enough water to drink, or the grass was going to be too short, or it just got too late, and they ended up bringing those cattle to town after last week's jump, and they thought they might be able to get out on them. And then out in your Nebraska and your western ranch regions, you saw ranchers that normally keep their own yearlings back, that have a fall and a spring herd. They normally keep their yearlings back and graze them in the summer, but they just needed that grass to keep their cows and maybe to cut some more hay, and you started seeing some sales of those, which is kind of a negative indicator. But that big storm come in from Colorado and into western Kansas, and then moved up into Nebraska and South Dakota, and it was kind of a bad deal there for a day or two, and your temperatures are expected to go right kind of back where they were. But this late in the year, especially after Kansas reported high temperatures the day before of 75 degrees, and then you got wind chills below zero the very next day, and guys are just tired of this weather. They don't want any new cattle in it, and it really shut things down out in that part of the country, especially by the time it reached up to South Dakota. They had some big sales they were going to have out there this week, and most of them were either postponed or they just ran on a real light run. But in other places, after last week's higher market, you saw some guys that were holding on to cattle that had been waiting on the weather to straighten up in areas, and we really had fairly heavy receipts nationwide in the auctions this week. Places like Missouri, where they had 44,000 head of cattle just in the 20 auctions that we cover here in Missouri. But several of those sales were closed north of I-70. Some of those sales run on a every other week schedule this time of year, and they actually were closed. But we had 44,000 head of feeder cattle reported, and that was 20,000 head larger than the same week a year ago when we'd had a mild spring and temperatures were warm, and we were already getting into summertime mode by now. But your regional weighted averages this week in the north central states, 800 to 900 pound steer cost you $131.47 compared to $133.06 last week and $144.26 a year ago. Down in the south central states, 700 to 800 pound steer cost you $137.72 compared to $139.97 last week and $149.21 a year ago. Down the southeast, a 500 to 600 pound steer cost you $145.89 compared to $150.28 last week and $168.19 a year ago this week. That wraps up your feeder cattle market summary for this week. Check out our website for more information at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.